Good morning. My name is Debbie Huber. I am one of the teaching pastors here at Liberty Church, and it is my privilege to be with you there in the Philippines today. We had hoped to be able to travel personally, and through a series of events, we're unable to be with you in person, but I am so grateful to be able to speak to you today about two topics that are very near and dear to my heart. First, a little bit about me. As I said, I'm one of the teaching pastors, so I have a full counseling load here at Liberty Church, as well as teaching on various topics. I hold a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling and about 40 years of ministry in the church and outside of the church. I love listening to people and trying to help them become all that they were meant to be. Since I heard about this conference, I have been praying for you. I've been asking the Lord to show me how I could best speak into your life, and two topics came to the surface that I would like to share with you today. One of them is all about things that happen to you external to yourself. They happen because of bosses, because of parents, because of other employees, and it's called psychological safety in the workplace. The second topic is called self-care, and that is care that you do for you, by you. And so I want to start with psychological safety today, and my comments are actually being taken from a new book written by Amy C. Edmondson. The book is called The Fearless Organization: Creating Psychological Safety in the Workplace for Learning, Innovation, and Growth. Just remember psychological safety and you should be able to find the book. Psychological safety is defined as the climate in which people are comfortable expressing and being themselves without fear of embarrassment or retribution, confident that they'll not be humiliated, ignored, or blamed. They can ask questions when unsure and tend to trust and respect their colleagues. If you're like me, this environment is hard to achieve and very rare to find. But it is an environment that helps each of us become our best self at whatever we're doing. So what are some of the characteristics of psychological safety? Two big ones are trust and respect. In order for me to feel psychologically safe in any environment, I have to be able to trust that you care about me as a person and that you're willing to hear whatever questions might arise or comments that I might deem necessary to our given situation. I also have to understand that if I speak my mind on a particular topic, maybe raising an issue of safety, that you are not going to punitively punish me for sharing my ideas. In fact, you're going to respect that I might have an alternative viewpoint, even if you choose not to use it. Number two, PS, or psychological safety, has been proven that greater learning takes place in an environment where there's no fear. In fact, listen to this. There's a quote by Edmund Burke in the 1700s, and he said, "No passion so effectively robs the mind of all of its power of acting and reasoning as fear." We've actually discovered that fear activates the amygdala. That's the section of the brain that detects threats. And when fear comes to us, all the psychological and the physiological resources of the body get diverted to the heart, get diverted maybe to the stomach, and they go away from the brain, they go away from imagination, and this effectively impairs all analytic thinking and reasoning and creative insight. The school environment, as you know, is one of the best places for creativity to either be enhanced or killed. And so we want to do what we can to minimize fear in our students as well as in ourselves so that this creativity can come to the surface and new things can be discovered. So what is PS and what is it not? Psychological safety is not being nice, not just for being nice's sake. Psychological safety in that environment, disagreements are going to happen because you and I will have differing viewpoints. I'll look at something from the object of the person, maybe from their feelings, from their thoughts, from their ideas, and you may be totally looking at the idea from how much is it going to cost? Is this feasible for our environment? What's going to happen? And so by sharing those two opposite perspectives, we may be able to gain an entire picture of what's happening. Psychological safety is also not lowering performance standards just to get along. In fact, it's been found that the best psychologically safe environment happens when there are very high standards and high psychological safety at the same time. In other words, when a person feels safe enough to share what they need to share and the standards of achievement are very high. Why is this a good idea? What are the pros to creating this kind of an environment? Number one, when psychological safety is in place, harm is reduced. When people speak up, ask questions, debate vigorously, and commit themselves to continuous learning and improvement, good things happen. Lives literally can be saved. If you think about this happening in the medical field, if I'm a nurse on a staff and I know that a particular method or a particular activity that we're using is actually harming patients and I don't say anything because I'm threatened by my boss or I'm afraid that he or she is going to think less of me and I let it go on, then the potential for a harm to a patient is very, very high. This same thing could happen in the classroom. If I know that a particular standard or a particular way of doing something is actually harming students, maybe I think it's only happening in my classroom. Maybe I'm a newer teacher, or maybe I'm a newer administrator and I'm afraid of making waves and I don't speak up, then harm can happen to students and maybe more than one. So it's really important that we develop candor, transparency, and actually the ability to learn from error. Unfortunately, we can't go through life without making mistakes. Mistakes are a part of everyday learning. The only thing that turns that into a tragedy is if I don't learn from those mistakes. If I can't make improvements and I can't figure out a way to do it better the next time. So psychological safety creates an environment where it's possible for me to speak my mind in a candid way, be transparent enough to share, maybe if I'm going back and forth on a particular solution, maybe making some mistakes in the process, but learning from those errors and then creating an even better project after that. So what are some of the skills that you might need? Say you're an administrator and you're recognizing that you don't have this kind of an environment. Or maybe you're a teacher in a classroom and you would like to see this kind of an environment come in so that your students feel comfortable enough to be as creative as they were created to be. How do we get there? Number one, humble listening. It's creating a safe space to speak up, where even if people say something that seems stupid at the moment, we don't treat them that way. We help them understand, you know what, I agree with you on this point, but here's where I see a weakness in what you're saying. So we create that environment where it's safe for them to speak up without feeling like they're going to lose something in the process. The goal has to be to bring out the most voices. This happens maybe sitting around a table as a group of teachers with the principal or the head administrator of the school conducting a meeting. You want, as that leader, to have as many voices in the room expressed as possible. That's the goal. So that administrator or that leader of that team or that meeting has to take a position of, I really want to hear what you have to say today. I'm coming here to present this idea, but I don't have all the answers. I may have an idea of how I think it's going to progress, but by listening to you, you're going to help me actually come up with a better product. So some of the questions that that leader or that administrator might ask would sound something like this. Was everything as safe or creative with your students, with your workers, as you would have liked? What might we be missing? Is there anything else that we haven't thought of? Who has a different perspective? What leads you to think that way? And can you give an example of what you're talking about? In this environment of humble listening, people are free to explore ideas. They're free to throw things out, even if they don't turn out to work. People respond productively, they respond effectively and respectfully, offering a path forward toward the goal. Number 2, besides humble listening, we need permission to care about the organization. I don't need to just care about my role or my job. I need to care about how the overall school is progressing, how the overall district is progressing. What's going to happen if my idea goes forward? How's it going to impact the greatest number of people? I need permission to care. Number 2, I have to be able to accept failure or mistake as part of the process. I'm a perfectionist. This one would be very, very difficult for me. I've spent the majority of my life trying to be perfect. Do you know how much stress that creates in my life? A whole lot. And so adopting an idea or a position of psychological safety would allow me to sleep better at night. It would allow me to accept my life where it is, understanding that I have a whole lot to offer, but I'm not always right. So accepting that I might fail along the way. Number 4, I have to value the discipline of both experimentation and rapid evaluation. And what that means is there needs to be a process in all of our planning where we take a look at what we've actually discovered and we say, is it working? Are we getting what we thought we were going to get? And if not, we go back to the drawing board and we try it again. So in this framework, psychological safety is created by people outside of us, and it affects us as workers. But if the environment is psychologically safe, and maybe I think some things could help change this to make it even more creative or even more safe to work here, I need to take a risk and speak up and share my idea. If administrators are not willing or not ready yet to accept that, it's okay. Life is a process. And maybe if I share again tomorrow, eventually we can all go to that place of safety. So psychological safety is the environment that's created for you by others, bosses and coworkers where you work. There's a second phase to this, and it's called self-care. Now, self-care has come to the surface over recent weeks and months and years because of stress. Stress is a natural part of our life. It affects every single one of us. The problem is that it affects every single area of our life. It affects us mentally, emotionally, physically, relationally, and spiritually. When I did my graduate work, I learned that I was a bio, psycho, social, sexual, spiritual being. Should I say that again? Bio, psycho, social, sexual, spiritual being. What that means is there are 5 key or 5 primary components of my life that are affected by every decision I make. If one of these 5 is out of order, it's going to affect the rest. And so I have to do what I can every single day to affect each of these 5 areas. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today. It's called self-care. Self-care is what you do for you, by you. You're the one that's in charge. You're the one that's in control. How many of you have flown on a plane lately? I can't see you, you know that, but I'm hoping around this room you felt comfortable enough to raise your hand. If you've been on an airline recently, then you've heard the spiel, just like I have, multiple times, where they talk about the oxygen mask that's going to drop from the compartment. And they tell you this. They say, if you're traveling with another person or with a small child, put on your own oxygen mask first. Yep, that's right. Self-care is just like putting on your own oxygen mask first. I would submit to you, teacher, that you can't be the best teacher for the students in your classroom if you are suffering yourself with stress or burnout. I would submit to you, administrator, that you're going to be short, you're going to be a little more negative with people, you're not going to feel as positive about your job if you're struggling under the effects of stress in your life and you haven't found a way to release that. So today I want to offer some ways for you to avoid burnout. You know what that means? That's that feeling in the morning when the alarm clock goes off and you slap the alarm clock and you pull the pillow over your head because you don't want to get out of bed in the morning. Have you ever been there? I have. There have been lots of mornings when I've prayed that scripture that says, Jesus, I need you to be the strength today because I'm at the end of myself. Have you ever been there? It's not a pretty place to be. And we have to figure out a way to avoid that. There really is a way for us to go to work day after day after day and feel really good about what we're doing, offer a smile to people, even have enough left over to give them without depleting ourselves. That's what I want to talk to you about. How do we do that? What is self-care? It's any action that will improve your physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, social, and professional health. These can be really big deals, like getting away and going to a retreat center somewhere, or it can be something small, like packing a healthy lunch instead of needing to go get the closest fast food. These ideas are multiple, and I'm only going to cover a few of them today, and then I'm going to tell you where you can go on the internet to find more resources. One of the first strategies that you have to figure out how to do is to set healthy boundaries. I want you all to say the following word with me. Say the word no. Come on, I can't hear you. Say it a little louder. No. Somehow, as professionals, we don't like using that word. And yet it's one of the healthiest words that we can use when we try to set healthy boundaries with people. You know those people as well as I do. Your agenda is set for the day, and you have the same person who comes into your office again with something that's not really an emergency. You would love to be able to help them, but your schedule's stacked. You know what you do. You do what I do. You try to find 5 minutes to talk to them, and you cram them in. You know where that 5 minutes often comes from? Your lunch hour or your free prep period. You're all laughing because you do it too. Setting healthy boundaries. It's knowing the difference between being able to help them and being at your capacity. It's feeling like it's okay to say no. How about if we schedule something on Monday instead of today, which might be Friday? How about if we can talk on the telephone instead of doing it in person? I have 5 minutes as I'm traveling to a meeting. I can speak to you at that point. Offering another alternative is often as good as needing to take the time at that moment. So set the healthy boundaries and be okay doing that. Number 2, you need to take some breaks. You ever had that feeling where you've sat at your desk too long? You know that feeling where all of a sudden you can't get comfortable, where you find yourself crossing your right leg and then crossing your left leg? Yep, I've been there too. When the joint in your hip just says everything, it's screaming, get up and take a walk. Medical professionals would tell all of us that we need to get up and take a brief 2 or 3 minute walk every hour or 2. If you haven't done that, I really encourage you to do that. Speaking of taking a break and going for a walk, what about exercise? When was the last time you took the time to go to a gym or even walk out your front door and walk around the block a few times? I'm a mental health person, and so I know that getting out and taking a 15 or a 20-minute walk, brisk, getting your heart rate up, is as good as drugs. I'm talking about the antidepressant kind of drugs that your doctor may prescribe. If you struggle with low-level depression, there's a couple of things that you can do to avoid that sadness. And one of them is going for a 15 or a 20-minute brisk walk once or twice a day. But I'm going to warn you, it's the last thing you're going to want to do. Because when we're feeling like that, we want to sit on the couch and veg. We just want to sit there and do brainless, mindless activities because people have been pulling on us and pulling on us and pulling on us. But if you will do that, you will feel better. That's you putting on your oxygen mask first, taking care of you. Doing something that helps you relax will give you the energy to be able to invest more in other people. So think about going for a brisk walk or a bike ride or a swim, whatever helps you most. Number 4, you have to know what your threshold of stress is. And this one kind of goes hand in hand with setting those healthy boundaries. You know, you can feel it when it's rising, when all of a sudden maybe you've been a little more short with your spouse than you usually are. Maybe one of your kids that you can usually put your arm around and you can enjoy their antics. All of a sudden you find yourself snapping at them. That means your stress threshold is about to be reached. Really important for you to find a way to diffuse that stress. The 5th recommendation is that you begin your day on a positive note. This can be as easy as figuring out 5 things that you're thankful for when you get out of bed. Maybe you open your eyes and while you're kind of lying there on your pillow, you just go, what am I most thankful for today? And you begin to list those things in your mind. You're going to find yourself ready to get up and begin your day. So I told you the ideas are forever long. Well, let me share with you a few of them. One of my favorites, but one of the hardest, is an activity called mindfulness. Now, mindfulness is what happens when we are totally present doing any event of our day. It's easiest or best to think about this while you're peeling an orange or a grapefruit or even a banana. I didn't have any of those available today. I was wishing I had an orange. Here's why. If you begin with an orange and you were to hold that nice, beautiful orange fruit in your hand and you were being mindful, you might notice that it has all kinds of bumps on it. You might also notice that it smells really good. Yeah? And so mindfulness would have you paying attention to everything while you're peeling that orange, and you're noticing that it's kind of splattering at you while you're peeling it. You might notice that the sections come apart easily, or maybe they're a little more difficult. My mouth is watering as I'm talking to you about this orange. But as I'm peeling this and I'm beginning to take a bite, your mouth will begin to salivate, and you'll taste it, and you'll either think, wow, this is the juiciest orange. Ooh, don't miss that. It's running down my chin. The juiciest orange I've ever had, or sometimes not. You've had those too. So mindfulness is doing any activity being fully present in the moment. Some other ideas. We talked about gratitude, maybe keeping a thankfulness journal and writing things down where you can go and review that. Asking for help. Is that hard for you? It is for me sometimes, but I've gotten to the point where I say, hey, do you have a few minutes to help me? People often will jump in and help you because they would like the same in return. What about laughter? Laughter is one of the best things that we can do to help ourselves. If you struggle being a little too serious, maybe find a really good joke book and read one or two a couple times a day. It might even rub off on your fellow coworkers. Find some 2-minute strategies that you can do at your desk. These can be simple stretches. They can be yoga poses. They can be breathing exercises where you breathe in slowly for a certain count, hold your breath for a couple of seconds, and then exhale. Anything that helps you feel better. So here's a hard question, teachers, administrators. What about school vacations? Do you find yourself grading papers and planning projects all the way through the vacation? Do you find yourself wishing that you could take a holiday? Or here's the worst one, you actually go to the resort with your family, but you're stuck in the room while they're swimming or they're snorkeling or they're doing something fun? What if we could change that? What if your school vacation became your vacation as well? Well, I found a few of these ideas on a website that was actually written for teachers. So let me share some of these ideas with you. One teacher said, build your curriculum calendar so that the weeks just before vacation and right after vacation are weeks that are filled with enrichment activities and projects for your students. Rather than having them full of tests or speeches or papers that you have to grade, have all of those papers, those projects, and those speeches done 2 weeks before the vacation. That gives you time to grade all of that, and the last day when the bell rings, you can leave the building with a clear mind and a clear heart, provided you do one more thing. You make the first week back from vacation a time that's more relaxed. It's full of enrichment activities for the students. Maybe they get to write papers or share speeches about what they've done on their holiday. Maybe they have another project where they're studying a certain person that they've always wanted to research but never had a place in the curriculum for. You're the teacher. Be as creative as you would like. During this week back from vacation, that can be your prep week. That can be your time to plan the next project or the next vacation. This gives you the maximum rest period while you are on break or while you are on vacation. A couple more ideas. Number 1, strategically use icebreakers right after those longer breaks to re-engage your students. So we've talked about two topics. We've talked about psychological safety, which is that environment that is created for you by other people. It's actually the building, it's the resources, it's the people that you interact with, whether you're the administrator or the educator yourself. It's all of that. That's psychological safety. We also talked briefly about self-care, those activities that you can do for yourself that actually increase your ability to relax during your workday. One of the things that I didn't mention is that you can have your personal stash of things that you need in your desk drawer. Those things where you can open that drawer and pull out a package of nuts or chocolate or anything that's going to help you. Maybe you want to keep tea bags or coffee packets or something in your desk so that you can run down to the lounge, heat some water, and have that brief time just to breathe in between classes or in between encounters with parents. I want to talk to you about how you can assess your own self-care. How can you assess where you are and where you might need to grow? I have two websites for you, and I'm going to speak them slowly so that you can go to the internet and pull these websites up. They have some wonderful assessments there for you. An assessment, you know, is just a test, maybe where you gauge on a scale of 1 to 5 where you are in any particular area. One of them is therapistaid.com. So it's T as in Tom, H as in Henry, E, R as in Ralph, A as in Apple, P as in Pastor, I as in Israel, S as in Sam, T as in Tom, A as in Apple, I as in Israel, D as in David.com. Another one is mentoring.org. M as in Mary, E as in Edward, N as in Nancy, T as in Tom, O as in organization, R as in Ralph, I as in Israel, N as in Nancy, G as in go.org. If you go to either of those websites and put in self-care assessment, one will come up. Now, what I want you to do is pull up any self-care assessment. You'll see that they often have different categories. The one I'm looking at is physical self-care, psychological self-care, emotional self-care, spiritual self-care, and workplace or professional care. And there are multiple categories where you can then evaluate on a scale of 1 to 5 how you're doing at the current moment. Now, the evaluation itself is not helpful unless you take that and create some kind of a self-care plan for being able to move forward. So here's an idea. There's a couple of categories here. The first one is eat regularly. In other words, do you eat breakfast every day? Do you eat lunch every day? Do you eat dinner every day? On a scale of 1 to 5. Now, for me, my schedule gets in the way, and so maybe I would only give that a 3. And maybe I would say, I've been eating out too much, and so sodium is an issue, and so I'm noticing my rings are tight, or maybe I'm a little more sluggish than I should be. So then what happens is, I can sit down and say, I've been eating out 3 days a week. You know what? I'm going to make it a goal to only eat out 2 days a week. And so I write that down. My plan is to only go out to eat 2 days. So that is a goal for me. Maybe the next one is exercise. And I realize that, you know what? In the last 6 weeks, I've taken 2 walks. Okay, that's got to change. So I make it a goal and write it down in the physical category. I'm going to go for walks 4 times, well, that's a 3, right? 3 times or 4 times this next week. And I actually write it down and I purpose to go forward. That's physical. I would do the same thing with each of these other categories, finding out where I am currently, making a plan for being able to move forward. So maybe if I'm at a 3, within 3 weeks, I can take that one to a 4. If I'm at a 0, maybe within 6 weeks or 8 weeks, I can move that one to a 3. The idea is any success, any forward movement is going to make you feel better in whichever category you're growing and working, but it's also going to make you feel better about yourself. The other thing that happens is we become models for our coworkers or for the students in our classroom. So not only are we getting better personally, but we're actually helping the overall atmosphere of our organization to improve as well. So that's self-care. Now I wanted to take just a couple of minutes and talk to you about a strategy to work with children who maybe are causing difficulties in the classroom. Recently, I was privileged to attend a training program that was called Positive Parenting Project, Triple P. In this program, we were trained to be counselors for parents who are struggling with their children. And man, as I listened to that training, I thought, I wish this would have been available when our kids, who are now 36 and 31, when they were young. If I had known some of these skills and strategies as a parent, it would have made me a better parent and probably would have affected the other parents who were in our circle. So there are 17 strategies that this program actually teaches. Again, if you were to put in Positive Parenting Project into Google, several of these things would come up. So they're YouTube videos, by the way, so they would really help you with that. But there were a couple that I wanted to talk to you about. One of them that is just really cool is called Ask, Say, Do. And this is a skill that you use when you're teaching certain skills that have multiple tasks in them. And the one that was demonstrated on the web is something as simple as brushing your teeth. And if you're first teaching a child how to brush their teeth, you have to be as basic as grab your toothbrush, hold it like this, put a bead of toothpaste on it, then put it in your mouth and go in a circular motion. There's just multiple steps that you have to work with the child. So maybe you do all of that step by step by step. This could be the same thing. I remember having SRA when I was in school. So we were learning to read, and SRA, I don't even know what it stood for. I can't remember anymore because this was when I was very young student, 3rd grade, 4th grade. We had these cards that were filed, and they were different colors. Maybe they were pink or purple or red or orange. I remember brown too. And on each of these cards, there was printed a story, and you would first read the story, and then you would go and take the test. And as you progressed, you got to move up colors. So it was a fun way to learn to read. But there were multiple steps in that. And so I remember the teacher taking the time, one step at a time, to teach us how to be independent, because SRA was something we could do on our own after finishing our regular classroom work. So using something like that, this ask, say, do would work very well. So you would start by asking the student, what's the first step when you're evaluating or when you're moving into SRA, Debbie? What's the first thing that you need to do? I need to raise my hand and ask permission to leave my seat. That's very good. Excellent. Okay, what's the next step that you would do? I can go back to the box and I can check and see which color I'm in. Excellent. You're remembering very, very well. And you take the student all the way through until all of a sudden they're not sure what the next step is. Then you say what the next step is and you watch them do it. And as they are successful in it, you congratulate them. Now it seems like it's time consuming, but by asking the student first, what you're really doing is you're activating the section of their brain that is creating memory for them. And so ask, say, do. It's an excellent way to teach children how to do things that have multiple steps in them. Another one that I found very interesting as a parent, and I probably would use even here at Liberty as I deal with children here, is understanding the difference between using quiet time and using time out, or just backing up things that I've asked students to do and using logical consequences. I remember when our children were very small, my husband, logical consequence. What's the logical consequence? That was his favorite mantra, if you will. And so there were often times when whatever was going on, he would ask me, okay, instead of you getting involved in disciplining this, what's the logical consequence? So for our kids who were very good students, if they had a day when they chose not to do their homework, what's the logical consequence? Instead of mom getting involved and taking them to school and explaining why they didn't get it done, unless it was mom's fault, they need to go to the school and tell the teacher themselves, I chose to watch television last night instead of doing my math assignment. That would be the logical consequence. But what do you do if the logical consequence doesn't work? Then you might need to take it up a level and use something like quiet time. Now, quiet time happens in younger children. Maybe they're fighting. Maybe they're not able to get along. Maybe they're arguing who's going to be up to bat next or who's going to be the captain of the team. And they can't seem to settle it themselves. Whoever seems to be the aggressor, or possibly both students, we sit them on the outside of the activity and we make them watch because they can't get along doing it. And so sitting on the edge of the activity would be the first way of helping the child calm down. Once they're calm, then we take them aside and we offer them choices. And we go back to the beginning of that. When you and Johnny were fighting, what was going on inside of you? What were you feeling? And they'll be able to tell you, well, I just wanted my own way and he got to be the captain the last time. You've heard it. You know what they say. And so you might be able to take them back to that place and validate their feelings, help them understand that, you know what, those are normal feelings, but look what happened. Because you couldn't settle it together, you both got removed from the activity. Then you help them understand they had a choice, that they could have done something different. You may have to help them learn what that is so they can see it for the next time. If that quiet time does not work for them, then the child might need a timeout, literally where they're set aside in a separate place from the rest of the students because their emotions are out of control. Maybe they're angry, maybe they're argumentative, maybe they don't know how at that moment to close their mouth. You see, when their emotions get so out of control, they literally can't be quiet. There's a physiological thing that happens inside of us, and it's all the adrenaline and all of those chemicals inside of us that are going, and we literally are out of control at that moment. And so the purpose of the setting aside or the quiet time is to give them a chance to calm down. And so at that moment where they can calm down, then you can bring them back and give them a chance to try it again. So you may be asking right now, how do you know how long to give them a timeout? The general rule of thumb is that you have them be quiet and take a timeout 1 minute for each year of their age. So a 10-year-old child, you can probably give them a 10-minute timeout, and so forth. So I have found these skills to just be amazing. The thing I didn't understand as a parent is that it was very important to give the child a chance to be successful as soon as possible. So if I gave my child a 5-minute timeout because they're fighting over who has the remote control for the television or the game console, maybe after that 5 minutes was over, I would bring them back into the television room or where the game console is, and I would say, let's try this again. And we'll set the remote control and we'll see what happens. Whoever is successful gets to choose the game. So these skills can be ways to help with those children who are extremely disruptive in the classroom as well. So I'm praying that something that I've been able to share with you today has been helpful for you. It has been my pleasure and my privilege to share with you. If you have questions, I'm sure you'd be able to ask Pastor Richard, and he would give you the best answer that he has. And so thank you so much for your attention. I'm asking you, go to those websites, take the self-care assessment, make a plan for your future. You will be a more effective teacher or administrator. God bless you.